Welcome back, fellow Dabblers. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how I got into Kings of War and how I started my first army in Kings of War that you see here. So if you're interested in hearing me ramble about my journey into and continuing through Kings of War, watch on. For new people to the channel, you might be wondering about the kind of content that this channel produces. Well, it's an eclectic mix of my hobbying, which is most of what I'm interested in and willing to put up, and my wife's stitching. So if you don't mind having a bit of this and a bit of that popping up in your subscription feed, please subscribe, like the video, add a comment, hit the bell button. Yeah, you get the idea. We've heard it all enough. So let's dive right in. How did I start with all this? Well, it actually started with my co-worker at work, who is now a friend because we now share hobbies. He knew that I was into Warhammer, in terms of Warhammer 40,000, and I did say, I played fantasy, and he said that he played Kings of War. And I was thinking, I've heard of Kings of War, but I've never really seen it played. I just know it's kind of Warhammer fantasy, and that was it. So that was how I kind of regarded him towards the end of 2020. But in 2021, in January, he brought to my attention a little tournament that was going on, now that we could all play games together. And he was mentioning the fact that new players coming to this tournament would receive a starter army of their choice from Mantic. And so, as any wargamer, I was enticed by the idea of having some new models, even if they were from a game system that I currently did not play. So enticed as I was, I decided, yes, why wouldn't I? I did have a lot of fantasy miniatures lying around, goblins, which are not pictured here because they are not painted and they don't look that great. But I had a whole bunch of stuff from my previous life as a Warhammer fantasy player that was just lying around, and I thought, well, at least I can take it out and enjoy it. So, after a bit of to and froing about how the game actually works and learning a bit, I managed to get an army list together that was full of goblins and trolls, and I took it, and I didn't do very well because obviously it was my first tournament, but I did win one game out of the three, and I thought that was pretty good considering it was my first time. So what that led me to believe, and what that showed me, was that actually Kings of War is really easy to learn because I learned it in the space of essentially the few minutes that I had right at the start of the game, and I started picking it up, getting the words and the rules and how it all worked. But also that in a tournament environment where people did want to win, it didn't feel like a pain, a chore, or like my head was hurting. Because if anyone has played any big, long Warhammer games, they'll know that, getting into the 4th and 5th hours of a Warhammer fantasy game, your brain just starts to stop doing things correctly. It doesn't want to figure out tactics, and it doesn't want to figure out the numbers of dice that you need to roll. But that didn't happen. I was still fresh. It was great. It was a combination, essentially, of streamlined ruled sets that meant that finding out what each unit did was very straightforward, and using them on the battlefield was always easy. And so this led me to go down the rabbit hole now of collecting of Forces of the Abyss army, because this was the starter army that I picked. I didn't really think I needed more goblins, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to go down the goblin route. But I had seen on YouTube someone review these Flamebearer sculpts that you see here, and I knew that they looked cool, and I knew that the Succubi units looked cool, and so I thought, yep, that's kind of the ones I like. It also came with some horsemen that you can see over there, the Abyssal Horsemen, and so put it all together, I knew that I was going to enjoy this kind of army. And so that's how I got into it, actually. It was with that army, and then I just quickly started putting it together, painting it, went to the next tournament in 2 months' time with at least one of these units painted, but most of it unpainted. Sorry to everyone that had to go against another unpainted army. But now that we're at getting towards the tail end of 2021, I can safely say that I have a full army that I think here is about 2,500 points, fully painted. It might be almost 3,000, actually. And so I'm very proud of this. And so this video essentially is me showing off all my hard work. So what we have here, and I'm going to go through it unit by unit, and I'm going to be talking about what I kind of like, how I want to use them, and why they're there, essentially. I'll also talk about where the models came from, because as you may not be aware, the cool thing about Kings of War is that you can use any model that you like to represent any model. The main caveat is that it fits on the base The base sizes are very strictly adhered to in the game because they form part of the key game mechanics. But as long as your models are on the bases and generally represent what they should, then everyone's usually quite happy about it. Obviously, we want to support the company that actually creates this game, creates the rule set and produces some wonderful miniatures. So I do try to buy their miniatures as much as I buy other miniatures that I see. But it's just really liberating that you can go into a game store and you might see on the rack, you see all those D&D miniatures, for instance. So like this one here, my Efreet. So you see all these D&D miniatures and you think, oh, they're really cool, but I'm not going to use them. You know, maybe you play D&D and you'll get use out of them. But for your general wargamer, such as a fantasy wargamer, in Warhammer Fantasy, you would see these cool miniatures, but you're thinking, oh, but if I grab them and I go to a tournament and they say they're only Games Workshop stuff, then, you know, you might be out of luck. But in this case, you can go ham. You can go Games Workshop, you can go Warlord miniatures, Perry miniatures, anything goes. As long as it's generally, like, you can understand what it is. You know, the giant is a giant something. It doesn't have to be like, always a one-to-one. And so that's why I'm going to go through my army to show you the kinds of different units that can be used, and some that are just straight up Mantic. So let's go with the units right in the front, not the individuals, but starting with the Flamebearers. So I've got here a regiment of Flamebearers and then 4 troops, just in case I ever want to bring them as troops, but I can always put them together, like, whoop, it's a regiment. So these are ultra popular amongst Forces of the Abyss players. And that's because, well, they're awesome. Because they're the main shooting unit of the army. And so they shoot at 18 inches. They have steady aim. That means that they can move and shoot. And they have piercing 1. So it's slightly armor piercing, helping get through some of the armor of those tougher units out there, or just really destroy the weaker units. And the best part is that they're not too expensive. They are unlocking, so they allow you to get extra characters into your army, and overall they just have a very consistent damage output, really thanks to that steady aim. And they hit on 4+, which is pretty rare for some of the ranged units these days. And so all of this combines to make a unit that you almost have to auto-include. So, and if you are going to include them, you want to include more than one. So what I've got here, I have the 3 units. So if I'm going into a big points game like 2300, I'll probably bring all 3, and so that's 30 shots, hitting on 4s with steady aim and piercing 1. And so this is really fantastic. And since they can have steady aim, they can actually move and shoot. So that means they essentially have a range of 23 inches. They can move and shoot off. The best part is that they're quite versatile. So, you know, they're a scoring unit. You can keep them on some objectives if you need to. You can move them up. You can use them as chaff in a tight bunch. And the consistent way to fire, if you put all 30 shots into a single unit, you'll probably remove it. So a lot of people are rightly scared of these guys because they put out a lot of damage and they're not all that hard. They're not hard at all to include into a list, unlike some other ranged options. So that's why I have 3 of them. And so essentially all the lower Abyssals that came in the starter set, I turned nearly all of them into Flamebearers. With the only ones I did not was I saw there was 2-handed weapons in there, those big chonking axes. So I put those axes on, and so I've got 8 lower Abyssals with axes. And so I hope to slowly build that up to make myself a horde of lower Abyssals to go with them. So that's the Flamebearers. They are fantastic, and I just got to bring them to every game. Now moving over here, this miniature on the 40mm base, so I'll bring him forward. This is my Abyssal Warlock. So this is the common leader that you would have accompanying your Flamebearers, because he also has these same ranged attacks. He has the firebolts, as denoted by the fire on his fist, which is actually just made up of Sylvaneth bits that I've tacked in there. So he also can shoot. He inspires, so he can help keep these guys around a little bit longer, but he also has a couple of nifty spells, and I always give him Bane Chant to actually give some crushing strength to an Abyssal Guard unit nearby, or maybe the Molochs if they need it. So this is my spellcaster. The model itself is obviously not the Abyssal Warlock. I actually hope to get it one day. But this is the legs of a Mordor troll, good old metal ones from the original Games Workshop Mordor troll. And then we've got green stuffed belly and shoulders, and then moving into some arms that are both from the River Troll kit, so I had some spare arms. We've got a River Troll head, you might see better from that angle, so kind of demonic. And then I gave him some little cutesy little wings, and these are from the Gargoyle kit. So they look like they definitely wouldn't help him fly. And then I have a scythe on a stick. So that well, essentially that's from the Tyranids. So that's a Tyranid, I think, some kind of bone scythe or something. Anyway, that is on a stick to give him a nice staff. This was originally, in my former life, a Nurgle Demon Prince. Back when Nurgle Demon Princes were amazing, and miniatures for Nurgle Demon Princes were few and far between. So you would always convert your own. And then I added the fire here when I realized he was going to be Abyssal Warlock, just to give him that, you know, so he actually looks like he can cast his flames. So you can see that right there, shooting off his own firebolts, along with the Flamebearers. Then moving on to the right here, I've got a unit that I'm actually quite proud of. So I only put these together kind of recently, and you might have seen me finishing them off in one of my painting videos. So these are my Tormented Souls. So the models themselves are actually from the Age of Sigmar range. So these are the Mirmorn Banshees, and they're still on their bases, as you can see, because those bases just have too much cool detail to really throw away. And if I got rid of it, a lot of them contain parts of the base on the model itself, so it would be some awkward fiddling around and filing to try and free them totally from their base. So I thought, nah, include it, cover it in super glue mixed with sand and grit, put in some extra skulls, and voila, you have Tormented Souls. And they really do look like they could fly. I don't mind the Mantic miniatures too much, but they don't look like they would fly. Whereas these definitely look like Tormented Souls. Especially I gave them the green kind of glow that I'm quite proud of. It's kind of a mix of the Hexwraith technical paint as well as the Lamenter's yellow glaze, just to give it a bit of more of a fiery look rather than just a ghostly look. And that's kind of the green that I go for throughout my army whenever fire comes up. That's the kind of green. So these Tormented Souls, they're great. They're flying, as I've mentioned. They don't fly super far. They're not speed 10 like you would expect most flyers to be. So they're speed 8, a bit slower, and they're not nimble. So you have to be pretty forward-thinking in how you might use them. But they do pack a slight punch. You know, they've got Crushing Strength 1, they've got Life Leech to heal themselves up, so you can always use them in a pinch, and they're fearless. So they're dash 17 as a regiment, and I think dash 14 as a troop. Oh, this is a regiment, that's a troop. And so that means that as far as flying units go, they're actually quite durable. And so I've sent them into situations where I thought they would die almost instantly, and they actually sat there for a really long time, because unless they get taken out straight away, they can pretty much start getting their wounds back. So I would call these pretty thick chaff, and there will be my kind of get in the way kind of unit until I can get my hand on some gargoyles. But right now, unfortunately, there is not really any way to buy gargoyles in Australia while we're in lockdown. So one day I'll get gargoyles, because I know those are the go-to get in the way unit, chaff, to, you know, essentially block up your enemy. But for now, I will go with Tormented Souls. And then once I get the gargoyles, then the Tormented Souls can resume being the heavy hitters that they should be. So yeah, that is Tormented Souls. Quite proud of that. Now, moving right along, let's go to my characters at the front so I don't leave them. So here we have the Succubus. Not Succubus, Seductress, leader of the Succubi. So this is actually a sorceress, Dark Elf sorceress model that I had lying around for ages. My wife actually chose this model because she liked it. And I thought, well, I'll get it for her. And she painted it blue-skinned, and I thought, gosh, blue skin's a bit silly, but why not? And so I didn't really have an army to go with it, so it just kind of languished in the display cabinet. Until I started my blue-skinned Abyssals. And at that point, then it suddenly all made sense. So the only thing that was required then to bring her up to speed was essentially to give her wings, because the unit has fly and has speed 10. And I know you can get away with not having wings on it, people wouldn't be too annoyed, but I really wanted to put some wings on it, and I just so happened to have some nice feathery wings in my bits box. So I put them on, painted them black, so it's kind of like crow feathers, and off you go. You've got a Seductress ready to go out and take out the enemy characters. That's what she does. She has Duelist, she has Crushing 1, she's just going to fly away and keep making the enemy try and keep their wizards out of her targets. her iron sights. I don't know, she doesn't shoot. But her value is in disrupting the enemy's wizards enough that they can't be exactly where they want to be. She'll fly up the back, get in the way, and force them to move their wizards to be out of her sights. And so that's why I really wanted to have one in this list. I've used it a few times on Tabletop Simulator and just had so much fun. So here she is, and that's what she looks like. And I'm pretty happy with the model. It looks like a Seductress. Moving on next, we have the Abyssal Champion. So this is the metal model that actually comes also with the starter army. So this is from Mantic Games, and it's actually quite a cool sculpt. The only problem is he's quite delicate. You can see that tail there, very slender, so I'm pretty sure one day that's just going to snap right off. Also, his contact with the base is quite tentative. I tried to do some pinning through his foot, but since it's so small, it was really hard to get some pinning happening there. So I'm always scared he's going to fall off. So that is the only downside. I do hope that they bring him into resin. But as far as the actual unit goes, the Abyssal Champion's pretty good. So he's quite tough for a single character, and he can regenerate, and you can even give him a lightning bolt. And so I often do give him a lightning bolt, so he actually has something to do throughout the game, because otherwise he's usually just, sitting behind my forces back there, just, inspiring. But in order for him to actually have a role in the game, I usually like to give him lightning bolt, which he can take. If you really want to bump him up, then you can give him the boomstick as well, so he has a really hefty lightning bolt, and I did that a few times, and that was actually really fun. But otherwise, I usually tend to run him just with a simple lightning bolt and stick him in my army. He essentially has a similar damage output to the Warlock here, but the difference is he's quite good in close combat as well. Thanks to the special rule Mighty, he's also good at getting in the way when you need him to. And you would have seen that in my battle report, where I used him to protect my army from the Forest Guard Horde that was coming on into my army, and I really need to slow them down. So that's the Abyssal Champion. You can also take him with wings and all other kinds of things, but I usually try not to put too many points into my characters because it's a very easy trap to fall into. Now my next hero is this miniature here. So we can actually see, so there, you can see his face. So this is actually from the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures. So it's a D&D miniature, it's a Tiefling, which you probably can tell, yeah? So it's a Tiefling that I have painted up. I actually originally bought the Tiefling because I'm a Tiefling in my current D&D campaign, which we haven't played for a while, thanks to coronavirus. And then when I was starting my Forces of the Abyss army, I realized that, well, he can also play a role here as an Efreet, thanks to his awesome fire effects that he has going around him. So this Tiefling Warlock is an Efreet. And so what I use him for really is what Efreets are good as, is that 15 fireball. Just getting them in there and doing ludicrous amounts of fireball. It won't do that much damage, but the fact that it's always there and it's going to be pretty consistent 4 wounds is just pretty awesome. Now my favorite combo, which was suggested to me by my friend Matt, was to give him the Boots of Levitation. And thankfully he is wearing boots, which the actual Efreet is not. So the Boots of Levitation means that when he marches, or moves at the double, I should say, when he moves at the double, he can still shoot. So that allows him to use his pretty good movement, which is 7, to really zip up into in between the army, behind the enemy army, and just keep pestering with fireballs, and always able to move really fast. So that is a really fun combination. I used that in the only other tournament I got to go to, and it was just really fun to, well, essentially just annoy my opponents with this constant source of fireballs. So that is my Efreet, and I really enjoy him, and you can see that I put a lot of effort in because at the time I was painting some Harlequins, and so I thought to put some of the diamond pattern onto his cloak as well. So I'm quite proud of that diamond pattern there, because particularly as we're going around the fireball, it was pretty tricky to get some of this diamond pattern underneath this, because this comes completely assembled. I don't think there's an easy way to disassociate the fire from him, so I had to just try and get the paintbrush and the fine liner pen in there to do those very delicate diamonds. So we're finished with the front rank of my army, and you can see that consistently most of it is for shooting, because shooting is rather fun. So let's move on to the next rank in my army. So we have here the Abyssal Guard. So I'll bring them out here. So, what are these? Well, you've seen them before. I had them in my basing video where I was showing how I did this ice basing effect throughout my army. And so the Abyssal Guard are actually some, I think they're 5th edition, the first plastic Chaos Warriors that Games Workshop produced, the multi-part kit. And so you can see that they're very hunched over, they're very comical in a way, and that was just kind of the miniatures they produced at the time. Now, these go really cheap these days because no one really wants them. Since these models came out, Chaos Warriors have had 2 updates, and each one made them so much better and more menacing that these are just all laughable, essentially. And they're always hard to rank up because they're just so big. But then, so I got them very, very cheap a few years ago when I was starting my Chaos army. And they kind of languished unpainted until I started this army knowing I had these guys ready to go as Abyssal Guard. And so that's what they are. Essentially, I knew I needed something tough and menacing, and the Abyssal Guard is supposed to be that with the Defense 5. And so these guys, when painted up, so you can see that their skin's kind of purpley and bluey, that's my demon skin tone, so that they can really be sold as, you know, demonic, you know, foot soldiers. I've also got snuck in here one of the, I think it's an aspiring champion there, exalted champion, so just a metal model there, just to, I guess, add some variety to the poses here, because otherwise they're all just hunched guys holding shields. So I have 2 of those, so I have one there and one there, and they are my main kind. I was using them as my anvil, essentially. I was using them to take charges, but the problem is, even though they're defense 5, their nerve is only -16, so while they're fearless, they can still get taken off in a lucky charge. They can still get killed, essentially. And so what I was finding is I didn't really have anything in my army that could take a charge when I needed it to, or anything to really push up and maybe survive 1 round if it could. So, to answer that question, what can survive a charge, that's where these guys came in. So these is my Abyssal Ghoul Horde. So, a friend of mine that I've already mentioned, Matt, he plays the Night Stalkers, and so he was actually there on that very first gaming day at the tournament, and he chose the Night Stalker starter army. And so what that comes with is a whole range of fun miniatures, including these, the Scarecrows. Now he has this whole Nighthaunt collection from Age of Sigmar that he wanted to use, and these guys just didn't fit. You know, some of the other models, like the Butcher, the Mind Screech, all these other kind of bigger monsters, did fit in with the more ghostly kind of look he was going for, but these he felt were just a bit too comical, particularly with the hats. And so I got them off him, and then you can see that what I've done is I've painted them with the red skin here, and then just done all their rags and just browns, and then put them on this base that we've got essentially this nice 3-tone color, and I painted all their teeth. And so these are my Abyssal Ghouls. Lots of people tend to just use the Mantic Ghouls, but I don't really like them in terms of, you know, demonic enough. And so these look pretty wacky. Some have got tentacles. They've all got lots and lots of teeth. And yeah, it was actually quite fun to put this together. I was dreading it because, well, you know, it is. I think I got 30 miniatures on here, so I was going for preferred model count for this horde. But in the end, it was actually quite fun. And the way I painted them really quickly with contrast red. So this is, I think that was the Flesh Terror's contrast paint, and that you can see it just did a wonderful job. And then I just painted the rags, dry brushed them, did the metal, the teeth, all that kind of stuff, and it was really quick. And then you can see also in the ice, I've got some trying to get through the ice, if you can see from above. So I'm quite proud of this whole unit. So I painted them red so they really look demonic, but also that they look kind of different, because these are Abyssal Ghouls. They're supposed to be they were once mortal, and then have been tortured, corrupted, or twisted by the demonic forces to become the monsters that they now are. So they are quite different from the actual things that are, you know, native denizens of the Abyss. And so, like I said, these are my actual anvil, and also the unit that can go up fearlessly because they are just so big. They're a big horde. They have 21-23 nerves, so they won't be destroyed all that quickly. And thanks to their fury, even if they get put right on the edge, they can still hit back. The best part is they're actually really cheap. So I guess the problem with trying to use the Abyssal Guard as a kind of anvil unit is that, well, they've got a small footprint, so they're easy to get around, but also they're quite expensive. So being able to bring enough cover the whole battlefield is quite difficult. Whereas these guys are cheap. They're not going to do any damage because they're pretty awful in combat. But they've got defense 4, so they're not going to get destroyed all that quickly. And so that's what I found. They've actually been a really good, just speed hump for my enemies, and allows me to then have all my other more powerful things have a chance to pick what targets they want to charge. And it's a cool unit. I just like it. And I like the red as a contrast to the rest of my army because, yeah, I just wanted to change it up a little bit. So it really stands out when it's amongst my forces. So I've already talked about the Abyssal Guard here. And now I'm going to talk again about some characters. So this crazy knight here, you saw me painting. I was actually painting it in the same video as these guys here. This is my Helicoin. Alright, so you got the Helicoin Blood Mask, which is pretty much a hero version of what used to be called Helicoins, which are the Abyssal Horsemen over there. So the Helicoin Blood Mask, what he is for is to be an annoying kind of character. So he's just a small guy on a horse. He's not small. I made him really big. But what he's supposed to do is essentially either get in the way or go off and hit flying units to disorder them so they can't fly anymore, so your opponent's flyers. If they've got some dangerous dragons or dracons or anything that you can just get in your face, what this guy's supposed to do is go hit them. And the moment the damage is dealt in close combat to a flying unit, the next turn they will not be able to fly. So you've kind of foiled their plans. Sure, when they hit this guy back, he's probably going to die a horrible grisly death, but that is how he was created. He knows that's his purpose and he doesn't mind. Then, if there is no flyers to go against, he's still got a job. What he can go off and do, he can still go off and fight things such as getting to war machines in the back, or go off and try and kill some characters, or at least, disrupt the spellcasters. He's not as good as, say, the Seductress as killing characters, because she doubles attacks against individuals. But what he can do is consistently get at least one wound on something, because I usually run him with the Blade of Slashing, which allows him to reroll one failed hit roll. And so I send him in, he always gets at least that one wound off and just annoys my opponent. And so, essentially, he's such a main model in my armies. I start taking him all the time, but I decided to give him a suitably cool model. And so that's what I've got here. We've got this, I think this is the Chaos Horse from the, it's a horse from the Chaos Chariot kit. And then I've plonked on the Manticore Rider, the Chaos Lord on Manticore. With all his chains included. Because why not? He is my champion, and if he is going to die every game, he might as well look cool while doing it. Now next I have the Manifestation of Baal. So this is actually a special named character of the Forces of the Abyss, but he doesn't actually have a model. So I went off and I think it was in my second tournament that I saw in the store a miniature that caught my eye, and that's what this is based off. So this is the Jinn miniature from the Pathfinder's kind of range of miniatures, who did not come with wings. So he comes just as this Jinn guy with the shield and sword and the cool robes. And so then I thought, well, Manifestation of Baal is supposed to have wings. He's the right size miniature, but he needed some wings to show that he can fly and also give him a bit more menace. And so I scoured Thingiverse for some free STLs that contain some wings of the right size. And that's what you can see on this side, the printing when I was trying to, I guess, clean off all the supports. It doesn't look so good. But when you look at him from the front, as most miniatures usually are looked at, he doesn't look too shabby. So I could have gone and tried to find some actual, plastic wings, such as some Tyrannid wings or things like that. But I just couldn't be bothered because, I mean, this miniature himself, he costs $10. And then if I'm going to go out and try and find some really fancy wings that cost, $20, $30 on eBay and put them on him, I think that's a little bit silly. Because also, these Pathfinder miniatures, these D&D miniatures, the detail is not spectacular. You can see there the armor is a bit indistinct. So I thought, I don't want to go too far. And if one day I find a cooler Manifestation of Baal kind of demon model, I'll take that, but I'm really happy with this one. He turned out looking really cool. Just the wings are a little bit shabby around the back, but nothing else is really very impressive to look at from the back anyway, so I don't think anyone will see that. They'll only see him coming towards them ready to do some damage. So to talk about the unit himself, he is essentially, well, not an auto-include, but when it comes to having some monsters flying around, he's one of the best in the Forces of the Abyss, because he comes with a 7 lightning bolt, so he's always being able to do damage in every turn of the game, even if he's not in combat. If he's just flying around and menacing your opponent, saying, "Oh, I might charge you in the flank, I might charge you in the rear," that's good enough, because he can still always shoot off his lightning bolts. In combat, he's okay. He hasn't got that many attacks, but he isn't that big a character either, and so often it's just his threat that is his value. He also has a special rule that can disorder a whole bunch of units near him, but I haven't managed to pull that off yet, but I'll learn how to do it, because he could be able to fly in and do that ability and essentially shut down a whole bunch of shooting units, so that would be kind of cool, because he just disorders them. So maybe I will try to use him in that way, but for now, I use him for his threat, and he's also surprisingly cheap. Maybe that's a problem with all the special characters. So, now moving on to the final row, the bigger things. So we'll start here with this big dude, and you can hear this noise, that he is heavy. So this is my Abyssal Fiend. So you probably know what it is. It is a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. So the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth is from the Beastman range, and this one's metal, not resin, as they are now. And I think I got it just because years ago, as a kid, in a White Dwarf in 2003, I saw this miniature in the Beastman release, and I thought, whoa, this was the biggest miniature I'd ever seen. The detail on this miniature for something from 2003 is incredible. Look at the little guys up there. And it's just, I just didn't even know what it was, because, you know, Dragon Ogre was never something I had ever considered as a fantastical beast. And so I knew I had to get one. And so when I was collecting my Forces of Chaos, I got one because you can take them as a Forces of Chaos player. And I did use it a couple times, but, you know, in Warhammer Fantasy, monsters were always very disappointing. And so when it came time to start my Forces of the Abyss army, I saw that this guy could fit in as an Abyssal Fiend. So Abyssal Fiend is essentially the big bad demon, but without the wings, and this guy fits that to a T. So I did it in my own paint style, which is, you know, the kind of the purpley, bluey skin. Gave him nice blonde locks, as befitted, because he has such wonderful hair. I might as well do it nice and blonde. And then, as I was painting it, I realized that any time I touched parts of the metal, the paint would come off, so he's got a nice heavy coat of varnish. So hence he is hyper reflective, very glossy. But now I can rest easy that he's not going to lose his paint anytime soon. So, look at the detail. Look at the hair on the back. This is some quality sculpting from an earlier age. And so, what is the Abyssal Fiend good for? Well, he's actually just good for being the Abyssal Fiend. He has the Inspiring, so you can put him right in the middle of your army. He has a Fireball, so he can start putting out damage before he does even anything. And he can charge out and definitely get some good shots in. So he's essentially, he's a supporting kind of monster. I wouldn't send him in often by himself, because I've tried that. I've done that lots of times at the start and in plenty of practice games, and it just never really worked out in my way. And I had to learn that this guy, while powerful and can take out some smaller units, he's not as amazing as you might think he is. It's easy to get these monsters blown up in your head and think that they're amazing and capable of all kinds of destruction, when really you just got to treat them carefully and know where to put them in. So he's often best used when charging in with another unit. So you charge him with something else, he will consistently put some damage on, not enough perhaps by himself to get rid of the enemy unit, but when combined with, say, Abyssal Guard or, you know, the Ghouls, he will be able to, together with them, take out most units, or at least make them much weaker so that they're not going to hit back too hard. So that's the Abyssal Fiend. I haven't actually taken him all that much because we've been in lockdown, but yeah, you can see I did my ice basing effect here. He's actually on his original base, which is then covered in rocks and stuff, and then ice effect on top of that. So I'm quite happy with that miniature. Ooh, didn't mean to be looking at the floor. Now we go on to some more Mantic miniatures. What we got here, if we look back there, these are my Abyssal Horsemen. So we'll see if I can pick them up one-handed. Yes, I can. Ooh. So the Abyssal Horsemen, out of the way, tortured souls. So these are Abyssal Horsemen from the Mantic range. They are PVC plastic, so they're a little bit fiddly to put together, but I think they're really cool. So you can see that they look kind of different. So actually, what I found out very recently is that these were originally crafted for the Twilight Kin. So that's why they kind of look slender, maybe slightly elfish. And so it all started making sense. But in any case, I saw that they were quite different as well when I was painting them. And so while the rest of my army were to be blue demons with the fire, greeny fire, I realized that these guys firstly didn't show any skin to paint blue, but also they just didn't really look the same. So what I went with instead was painting them in a fashion that was similar to the game I was playing at the time, and I'm still playing because it's a long game, The Witcher. So this is essentially the Wild Hunt kind of art style. You've got the blackened, kind of blackish armor with red cloaks, because they're also known as the Red Riders. And then I've kind of given them a ghostly green mount. You can see their nostrils. It's quite ghostly green. So essentially what I've gone for is the Wild Hunt, going over the whole ice effect. And these guys actually inspired me to go with the ice effect. Florina suggested it, and then when I was thinking the Wild Hunt is always accompanied by frost and freezing conditions. And I thought, well, if these guys are going to be riding on ice, then the whole army has to be. And that's how we got here. So the Abyssal Horsemen are a really fantastic cavalry unit. They hit really hard because they have one Thunderous, which allows them to hit hard on the charge, but they have one Crushing, which allows them to keep hitting hard in case they get stuck anywhere. I usually do get them stuck. But thanks to their regeneration, if they get stuck anywhere, they usually tend to start healing themselves up. So it's not often that they die very quickly, as long as I use them right. So my common tactic is to have them behind either the Abyssal Guard or behind my Abyssal Ghouls, and wait for their moment to charge. So usually when these guys charge off, it's then these guys' time to shine, and they charge a second target. Or they can charge together. In any case, off they charge, and they will do lots of damage. They have Fury as well, so that means even when they are wavered, they are still going to keep hitting back. So I think they're just a fantastic unit, and I don't mind the sculpts whatsoever. I think they're actually really fun. I just wish maybe they were in resin, because then they'll be just a bit easier to put together. Because for some reason, the PVC and super glue just sometimes take a while to take to each other. And so, you know, there was often times where I was like, oh, it's glued, and then I put my finger away and it all just falls apart. So I would definitely like it if they were updated to a resin sculpt, but I understand there's too many miniatures in Kings of War to get them all to resin sculpts anytime soon. Now we're getting to the last ones. So, another Games Workshop miniature, so I'll grab them here, that I had owned previously. Get these back. And these are the actual Dragon Ogres. So that's a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth over there, that guy. These are Dragon Ogres as Molochs. So they're on a big, monstrous infantry base, a Horde one. And you can see that they fill it up pretty good, you know, because the Dragon Ogres are quite long. So I had 3 of these Dragon Ogres, and for a while I was thinking, well, what can they be? Because, you know, they're kind of a monster, but I don't need 3 monsters. I definitely don't need 3 Abyssal Fiends when I've already got my Shaggoth being one of them. So I didn't know what to do with them. And then it hit me. These guys, even though you're supposed to have, for Molochs, so that's what they're supposed to be, Molochs, there should be 6 in total, Molochs on a base, and then, you know, 4 for minimum model count, 5 for preferred model count. So these guys aren't anywhere near that. But then also, they're about double the size of a Moloch. So I thought, well, I think people will be fine with it, because they fill up the whole base. They are cool miniatures. I really like the Dragon Ogres. And so, yeah, that's how they kind of got onto here. And I always wanted some Molochs anyway, because when I played my Goblin army right at the start in that first game, I realized that big infantry is quite fun, because they just, I don't know, they can hit, one thing they all share in common is they tend to hit hard, and they also tend to have a measure of durability. Now, Molochs don't quite have the same durability as Trolls, because they're a bit more fragile, but they hit harder, and, you know, they're demonic kind of monstrous units. And so, yeah, I just wanted to have some. And while maybe one day I'll get some of the Mantic ones, I guess for now, I'll make do with these Dragon Ogre ones. And you can see the way I went with this base, I kind of, to have something for them to be leaping over, since nearly all of them have their claws raised in the air. I grabbed something from, you might recognize I think it was the Battle for Pelennor Fields, anyways, the Return of the King's Lord of the Rings starter set, and it would come with some terrain, and so that's what we've got here. We've got this fallen statue, And then I use some mantic bases piled on top of each other to make for some steps. So if you have all these plastic mantic bases left over, don't chuck them out. You could use them to make ruins. At least that's what I've done every time. I've got a few of them over here as well, you can see. So they make for some pretty good ruins. And so that's what I did here. And so that's this whole base that I've got going on here. So these guys are great. They hit hard, and I tend to have them behind my other units, particularly these guys, because the problem is their base is really wide. So often they'll be spied and shot at, and so they need to be behind something that will give them proper amounts of cover, and that would be this nice big horde of Abyssal Ghouls. So the horde of Abyssal Ghouls sits in front of the Molochs, and these guys will then charge off, and then the Molochs will follow suit. And so, yeah, fantastic Molochs. I know lots of people are fans of the Moloch unit, and I would like to hear some tips on how you use them. Now for the last one, the pièce de résistance. It is my Abyssal Archfiend. Archfiend of the Abyss. So this, I was so excited when I bought this, because I actually got this on the same day that I finished that very first tournament. So I finished the tournament, I did mediocre, but then I was given my starter box of Abyssals and I felt great. And then I looked at the range in the store and I saw that they had a box that contained a really cool looking demon, and I just started demons. And so it just seemed meant to be. And he was only 25 bucks. Oops. Well, yeah, he's only $25 because he is from the Magic the Gathering miniature range. He is Rakdos, Lord of Riots. You might recognize him from your black and red decks if you play Magic the Gathering. And anyway, he's not painted like Rakdos normally would be, because Rakdos is definitely a red kind of demon, but I painted him blue like my others. Went with his nice cool scythe and gave it the green glow that is typical to my army. And now I have an Archfiend of the Abyss that I'm really proud of. Now, like all these kinds of, I've mentioned already, you know, these kind of D&D miniatures, he's the same WizKids kind of quality, so the plastic is a little bit flexible. But that's okay. He's still, as a big model, still has enough of the detail to look really cool. But I have made the points of high touch, such as the wings. So if I'm moving him around the battlefield, I'll probably pick him up by the wings like this. So I've put varnish on the wings just so I don't rub away his paint. Because, you know, one really annoying thing about my favorite method of painting, which is dry brushing, is that if you rub it off, you've got a lot of steps to go back to get that skin tone if you rub it right back to the plastic. So that's why there's a bit of varnish on his wings, so that I've got points to touch. So if I have one little gaming tip for anyone, is if you've got some big miniatures that you don't want to lose paint on, and if you're at a tournament and you're having some snacks and your hands are getting a bit grubby, or you're sanitizing them all the time and you've got alcohol on your hands, you don't want to be grabbing your miniatures at the bare paint. So that's why a nice little coat of varnish, and you can get non-gloss varnish. I just don't have any because we're in lockdown. So use that to protect your miniatures. Now, as far as using the Abyssal Archfiend, it's taken a lot of practice. I'm still about 50% of the time using him wrong. Essentially, it's the same lessons as the Abyssal Fiend, except this guy, you really can't throw him in. You're very tempted because he can fly. He can move 10 inches, so he can fly all the way across the battlefield when he charges, a full 20 inches. You could send him into nearly any unit in the opposing army, and your opponent knows this. And so Matt, my regular opponent, will often place a tasty crap unit, such as a Scarecrow Regiment, or even maybe tempt me with something a bit more enticing, maybe some Phantoms, knowing that I'll probably fall for it and charge in, because I want to be the hero, I want to destroy things, and just get into the fight straight away. But really, he shines best when he's not getting into the fight straight away. He does best when he goes up the sides, uses his fireball that he comes with. He comes with a fireball 10, which is nothing to sneeze at. So if he just uses that and bides some time, chipping some wounds off, really getting into the right position, and then once the rest of my army is starting to get into a big grind and fighting, that's when he comes in, that's when he does best. When he's off on solo missions trying to kill things by himself, no. Terrible. So he needs to be part of a grander plan. Just like the Abyssal Fiend, they can't go in by themselves. He does have more attacks, he does have more defenses, higher nerve and all that, but still, it doesn't make him last all that much longer. So that is what I've learnt about this guy. And so essentially that's the lesson it comes to for dragons overall, is just not sending them in to the wrong places and not sending them in too quickly. You can always hold them back. And you want to, because these guys are scoring units as well. They've got a unit strength of 1, so you never know when they're going to win you the game. So it's silly to throw him away, and he's expensive in terms of points, not in terms of price. $25 for a miniature like this, amazing! I mean, you can see that the skull doesn't have much detail, but that's okay. The skin is surprisingly textured and took very well to dry brushing. So, yeah, overall, very happy with this miniature. So that's my army. I've painted this essentially mostly non-stop since I started in January. Starting with, well, January, I say February, because that's when I actually started with this army. The tournament was at the end of January. So I reckon I've done pretty good for painting all of this, assembling most of it was unassembled, in the space of 8 months. So next, I've still got a few units to finish for this that I'm just finishing up on. I've got some Hellhounds I want to add. And then I've also got, what else do I have? A unit of Succubi. And then I also have some more Abyssal Horsemen, because I actually have some Chaos Knights left over that will make some cool Horsemen. But that's all that remains for this army, and so it's already pretty big. And once those last units go in there, it'll be pretty much done, and I'll just be looking out for any cool demons that come my way to add to it. But my next army will be Goblins. And so I've been learning a lot about Goblins from Jeff O'Neill and his talks with Countercharge guys, and also lots of other discussions about how Goblin shooting and also just Goblin fighting in works such as Andy 2D6's Troll armies. And so learning from all of these things has got me really inspired to do my Goblins. But, you know, it's always shifting from one cool thing to the next. It was Demons in January, and now in September it is Goblins. And I'm thinking all about the Goblins. But I got to finish this army. I've got to finish the Hellhounds and finish those other units so that I can tie it off with a neat bow. No, I have no unpainted units, which is incredible. I've never had no unpainted units for an army. And so I'm really proud of this, and I really hope that, yeah, we can get through this bloody coronavirus situation here in Victoria, Australia soon, so I can put this on the table and really, well, probably just lose my Archfiend of the Abyss. Bye, everyone!